All right, welcome to our webinar on bicycle and pedestrian advisory councils. It's a panel discussion with three suburban advocates who have had experience as part of these councils. So just a quick background before we jump into the panel discussion. So Bike Walk Every Town is our suburban advocacy skills building program, and uh, it got started last year, and we're just trying to build up a network of advocates in the suburbs and make some change happen and improve biking and walking throughout our region. So Active Trans, we are a nonprofit and we advocate for walking, biking, and public transit to create healthy, sustainable, equitable communities. We're based in Chicago, but we serve the entire region. And the Bike Walk Every Town program is sponsored by both REI and UIC, so thanks to them. And we're recording this webinar in case you want to share this with anyone later. And so just real quickly, a background on what is a Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Council. So there are different types, but typically it is it's made up of both community members and government officials, and they help advise the municipality and provide accountability to move forward on commitments like different policies and plans so that all these biking and walking ideas can actually move forward. And we've been hearing from a lot of advocates in the suburbs who don't have any type of group like this in their community, and there's been a lot of interest. So I'm excited that we get to have three of our superstar advocates here today to talk about their experience on BPAC. And there's different ways that these groups can be structured, and some can work really efficiently and maybe others not. And so they're going to be sharing kind of a little bit of background on how their groups formed and some of the successes and lessons learned they've had from being a part of the groups. So then potentially some of you who don't have one of these BPACs, you can maybe consider getting one started in your community. So let me introduce you to our speakers. So we've got Tom Armstrong from the City of Elgin. We have Wharton Sinkler from the City of Des Plaines, and we have Jürgen Ufa from the Village of Arlington Heights. So each of them, they're going to be speaking for 10 or 15 minutes about their experiences on the BPAC, and then after they've each spoken a little bit about their what they've been working on, then we will open it up to all of you who are here on the webinar if you have any questions for them. So first we're going to get started with Tom. So Tom, he's worked for the City of Elgin for 26 years. He's retired now, but he was a senior planner. He retired in 2009, and he helped develop the city's 2008 Bikeway Master Plan. And even though he's retired, he's still very active in the community. He's on their BPAC, and he's part of their Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and many other different groups. He's also he bikes and he walks. He said he tries to get 10,000 steps in every day, which I thought was great. And he gardens, so he does all sorts of things. But I'm excited to have him here to share his expertise. So Tom, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, Maggie. As Maggie described, I retired from working with the City of Elgin in 2009, and prior to my retirement, I drafted guidelines for the establishment of an Elgin Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. The creation of that committee was one of the recommendations from the 2008 Elgin Bikeway Master Plan, which was, that effort was led by engineering consultants, Trans Systems, Chicago Area Bicycle Federation. Nick Jackson was a sub on that effort, so we had some input from the Chicago Bicycle Federation, now Active Transportation Alliance. Prior to drafting the guidelines for the Elgin BPAC, I researched the structure of similar committees operating across the country. And in particular, I looked at communities that were nationally recognized for their leadership in using best practices to promote active transportation. One that caught my attention was the Bicycle Committee in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I kind of used that as my template for laying out the structure of the Elgin BPAC committee. So our BPAC committee is comprised of community members who take an active interest in biking, walking, and transit as viable means of transportation, as well as representatives from city departments that interact with active transportation users. So our committee is comprised of 7 community members who are appointed by the mayor and city council. And then there are staff representatives, which include the police chief, the directors of community development, public works, and parks and recreation, or their designees. We are an advisory committee, so we don't have it's the same responsibility and import, I guess would be a good word, as a board or commission. We meet once a month on the first Tuesday of the month. Our meetings generally last about 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And we interact with the City of Elgin in a number of ways. One, we review and comment on plans for roadway construction, rehabilitation, and street resurfacing and striping. And so we work with our public works and engineering departments who oversee those projects to make sure that if there are bicycle accommodations planned for within that project area, that they get implemented as part of that project. We develop and recommend and provide comment on policies and ordinances related to bicycling, walking, and transit. We organize and or participate in public events, many of which are city-sponsored, but also other larger community events that are organized by other community groups. And finally, we create materials to encourage bicycling, walking, and transit as a viable means of transportation, along with working with other organizations at the local, state, and national levels to promote active transportation in Elgin. So those include Active Transportation Alliance, who we're working with right now, and Ride Illinois principally, but we've also done some work with Trails for Illinois in the past, doing some trail counts and survey work along the Fox River Trail, which extends to Elgin. We've had a number of successes since our BPAC committee was created in 2009, but we've also, of course, experienced challenges and have a lot of projects in mind for the coming years. Some of our successes include convincing the city to adopt a bicycle parking ordinance. It applies only to new construction, so it doesn't require retrofits of existing facilities unless there's a substantial reconstruction or addition put on buildings. So it applies to all commercial and industrial properties and to multifamily residential properties. A few years ago, we completed a citywide sidewalk gap and transit stop analysis that was working with Active Transportation Alliance. So we surveyed the entire sidewalk network citywide, which is quite a few miles of street, and identified every gap in that system. And our Public Works and Engineering Department now has been using that study to budget for and fill gaps in that system. A couple of years ago, the city actually constructed a new street, something that's typically done by the development community, but in this case it was a gap probably about a mile in length. This was during the height of the recession, so the developer had left town, and the city constructed what's called the South Street Extension, which connected some of the Elgin's newer subdivisions west of Randall Road with the commercial corridor along Randall Road. And as part of that, we convinced the city to construct a side path along the entire length of that street, which was not something that was not in the original plan. Had them remove a sidewalk and replace with a 10-foot wide asphalt side path, and it's been a very popular bikeway connection for the residents on the far west sides of Elgin. A couple of years ago, we also completed what's called Bike Route 1. For those of you that might be familiar with the Northwest Municipal Conference bike plan, Bike Route 1 is the westerly 2.5 miles of a route that's referred to in the plan as the Gulf Road Corridor route. And one day, when the connections are completed, that route will connect between Elgin and Evanston. So that was a big effort. We've completed bicycle-friendly community applications on 2 occasions over the years. First in 2010 and again in 2014. We did not receive bicycle-friendly community designation, but we were put on the honorable mention list both times. And we'll be probably reapplying again here this summer for bicycle-friendly community status. We host a lot of tabling events and bicycle corrals at community events, and then we're very active in celebrating the month of May as National Bike Month. And coming up in a couple of weeks in June, we will celebrate what we call Bike Walk Move Elgin Week, where we have activities planned to fill the entire week. So those are some of our successes. Challenges. One of our challenges is filling open slots for community representatives on our BPAC committee. It's an issue that's not unique to the BPAC committee. There are a number of boards and commissions that are having the same difficulty finding volunteers to fill empty seats. Of course, it's always a challenge. Again, we're a city-sponsored organization, so it's always a challenge to cost out and budget and get dollars budgeted for some of the infrastructure projects that we would like to do, especially in these times when city budgets are strapped. So even with grant opportunities, it still becomes a challenge. I worked in government for 26 years, so I understand that things don't always move quickly as one would like when you're jumping through the bureaucratic process. So that has been a challenge for some of my fellow committee members to get used to the pace of bureaucracy. We're anxious to get things done, and things simply don't happen as quickly as we would like. And then I think another challenge we have locally is convincing staff to take advantage of the many excellent design guidelines that can help inform design of projects. Um, Federal Highway Administration is open to making use of these various design guidelines as an alternative to the nationally accepted design standards. Some of the things we're working on and plans for the future include, right now we're working with Active Transportation to complete an Elgin bike map, and I think we're very near to seeing the first draft for that map, and that will get several thousand of those printed and distributed to throughout the community. The city obtained a grant to install bike racks in the downtown area several years ago, and that grant has kind of fallen into abeyance, so we are working to resurrect that grant, which should pay for about 80 to 90 inverted U bike racks to be distributed in the downtown area. We're working on a complete streets policy. We have one drafted that Active Transportation Alliance reviewed, and we made some revisions based on our comments, but we're hoping to get that in front of the City Council within the next year. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, we plan on, once again this summer, reapplying for bicycle-friendly community status. Another effort, there are a number of individuals and actually area bike shops that have been encouraging us to work with cyclists in the community to organize a local bike club. There are some bike clubs in surrounding communities, but really nothing that's really focused on the Elgin area in northern Kane County. So that's something that we're working on. Long term, I think a goal would be to get some wayfinding signage for a bikeway network that will kind of match up with our new Elgin bike map. And then finally, we're always looking to encourage more families and individuals to choose biking, walking, and transit as viable transportation modes. And we work with another group here in Elgin called Elgin Bike Hub to help promote that. Some advice for communities looking to start a BPAC committee. I think a good thing to do from the get-go is start a community conversation about active transportation, and that might be just advertising a meetup at a local restaurant or bar or something to get people to pull people together and talk about the issue generally. And then I would say you need to find champions among city staff and elected officials to help move that effort forward. Our experience in completing the bicycle-friendly community application has really been a great one. The League of American Bicyclists program really requires you to do a really thorough audit of what you're doing in your community as far as the 5 E's, education, encouragement, evaluation, planning, enforcement, and engineering. So I would encourage communities to really take a look at completing a bicycle-friendly community application to kind of really get a good baseline of where you're at in your community with respect to its bicycle friendliness. And then finally, I would recommend getting connected with the Active Transportation Alliance and our Bike Walk Every Town initiative. There's been several programs over the past few months, and it's a great way to get connected with like-minded people and share. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. That was you guys are doing a lot and a lot of great work. So thanks for sharing all of that. So next up, we've got Wharton. So I'm going to introduce you to Wharton. He's been biking all his life. He's actually from Philadelphia originally, but moved to Des Plaines in 2000. He works in research and development for UOP, and he is the co-founder of Des Plaines um, Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It's slightly different, so he'll explain how their group works, and he co-founded that in 2013. Um, and he's also involved in the Citizens Climate Lobby. It's a climate. They work on climate advocacy. He actually came to Active Trans not too long ago and presented about this to our staff. So it's an interesting side project. If you're curious, you should. We'll have everyone's contact info at the end of this webinar. So Morton, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Maggie. Yeah, the way this Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee got started was it was triggered by an active transportation plan in 2012, which I see actually Barb Cornu is on the line here, so she was involved in that with Active Trans at the time. I think maybe it was 2011 into 2012, and the plan called for creation by the city of a bike and pedestrian commission. And among other things, I mean, it was a very large 70-page plan with lots of very, really great suggestions. And that never happened. So I was kind of eager to get involved with that at the time and sort of anticipated that for a while. And then when it didn't happen, I kind of discussed it with some people who were connected with the city and then with Barb as well. And their consensus was, well, just go ahead and start your own. And what that means is that we're not part of the city. So we have no official connection to the city. We're really a group of citizen volunteers who have who sort of function as we gather ideas and initiatives that we want to see done and that people in the community want to have done here in Des Plaines, and we act as a conduit of those ideas, for those ideas to the city or to whoever it may be that we need to work with to get those things done. And so that's really how this got started. We started out with a rather small group of people, and we started an annual bike ride on the Des Plaines River Trail, and that allowed us to get more contact information. So we now have, more people that we can appeal to, and our, corresponding to our. We are actually a 501c3 organization, so we do have an official status in that regard. But our structure is really pretty fluid. We have 3 officers, a treasurer, a secretary, and a president. That's me. The treasurer is Cheryl Vriesecloak, and the secretary is Judy Sells. And we meet once a month, and we have good relationships with the mayor and with several of the aldermen. And that's been really important, is to see them, to be able to have easy access to them and respect on the part of the city for the suggestions that we bring to the table. We have had some successes. They're not huge successes, but I think it's important to sort of, I think actually just our existence. A lot of people point out to me that the fact that we exist and we go to, like the Taste of Des Plaines is going to be in the middle of June, and we'll have a table there. So we sort of create a visibility for biking and pedestrian needs and advocacy. So just by our existence, we represent something that people within the city who are doing a lot of great work actually to bring the city forward and make bikes and pedestrians a more important part of our transportation infrastructure. Those people have a group they can point to and say, look, there's a demand for this in the community. So even though, I think that's probably as an important accomplishment in and of itself. So a couple of the projects that we've been involved with, definitely the biggest one has been a dangerous rail underpass. It's actually on Northwest Highway, just outside of downtown Des Plaines, north and west of the city. There's a thing called the S-curve, which if you know Des Plaines, you probably have been through the S-curve. It's a 2 lanes each way, Northwest Highway, and absolutely no shoulder, and the road goes down and curves around under actually 2 rail lines simultaneously, and there's no, there are trestles, so there's no room for bikes. So it's really hazardous right now, and it also, because the rail lines extend a pretty good distance in either direction, it sort of cuts the city in half, really. That's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but not a big stretch. So we've gotten there's actually a new development going on the other side of the S-curve from downtown. So there's really a big need for those people, there will be, for those people to be able to get to downtown Des Plaines. And I really shudder to think that for that short a distance, they'll all be doing that by car because of the hazard. So we brought this to the city council, and we got them to approve a feasibility study, which was completed last year. And right now they're in phase 1 engineering, which is scheduled to be complete, I think, towards the end of this year. So hopefully by the summer of 2019, this will be a shovel-ready project. It's a pretty big project, but it will be a shovel-ready project, which means that they can apply for grants. So I think as far as successes, that's the thing that we all feel probably the most positive about it, because it will be a very significant improvement to the city of Des Plaines if that gets done. And I think there's a lot of support for it right now, so that's good. And we've done other smaller things like light timings. We're involved in a problem on the river trail north of Golf Road. There's a rail crossing, a freight line that crosses the forest preserve, crosses the Des Plaines River and the river trail. And the railroad in question has just recently put up barriers on either side of the rail line and no trespassing signs, which a lot of people are ignoring and carrying their bikes around and over. But, it's not sort of a comfortable situation, and the Forest Preserve District of Cook County is actually involved in a feasibility plan of their own in terms of how to deal with that problem, and we're involved in discussions with them. So, we can represent the needs of users of the trail and argue for as good a solution as we can get. I mean, my preferred solution would be an official at-grade pedestrian and bike crossing there, but that's probably a very difficult thing to get done. But I would very much like to see that actually, in some ways, just as so that we would have an example of that kind of infrastructure that we could point to, because there are a lot of other locations where having such a thing would make getting around by bike or on foot a lot easier. So that's another thing we're involved in. Challenges that we've had is, people's time is always challenging. It's also been interesting for me as somebody who's never been involved with government at the local level at all, really at any level, has been, learning how to get things done with the city, like planning a bike ride, which is officially sanctioned by the city, and they help us with funding it, actually. So we've been, that's been a learning experience. I think Tom alluded to some of that there's, certain things about how city bureaucracies work, that if you are doing this kind of work, you have to work with them, and that will be a learning experience. We would like to, other things that we've been involved with are, the Des Plaines is actually just completing right now a strategic plan for the next 10 years. And there a lot of comments from the public have come up that indicate there's support for improving problem routes, like from downtown Des Plaines to Oakton Community College right now is just not really any good way to get there without a car. I mean, you can do it on a bike, but it's just an unpleasant heavily trafficked route. So, I'd like to see, it will take time, but work on routes, improving routes like that, improved routes between centers of population in the city, neighborhoods, and the river trail itself. I mean, there's a couple of safe routes that get you to the river trail, but especially in the southern part of Des Plaines, getting onto the river trail, especially, on Tui, which has got a big tollway entrance on it, is difficult. So improving situations like that are things that we are talking to the city about, and they're aware of, and they know that we care about it. So hopefully those things in time will get done. My advice for other communities who may be interested in doing this kind of, in getting a group like this started, it's a time commitment. So, we're all overcommitted, but don't be ridiculous with but also I think it can be actually pretty easy to find people who are interested in doing this. There's so many benefits for our suburban communities: health, traffic reduction, air quality, benefits to climate. It's also a benefit for people who are strapped financially. If you can use a bike or walk to get around and do your business, that's a real benefit to people, especially elderly people or kids. And it also favors local businesses, right? If you're shopping on your bike or by foot, where are you shopping? You're shopping in your nearest downtown area. So a lot of those areas could use a lot of help. So if you stress these benefits, I think you'll find people who are happy to contribute their time and don't, I think there are benefits either way in terms of being part of the city. If you're part of the city, you have access to a lot more resources, to a lot of the key decision makers. It's easier for you to get their ear. But if you're not part of the city, it's also easier to, send a mass email to residents advocating for something that's currently being argued about in city council, right? If you're a city commission, that would be an awkward thing to be doing, and would probably invite trouble. So there's kind of, it's not necessarily the case that you have to be a city organ. I think there's even benefits to being your own, being an independent 501c3 like we are. So I think did I miss anything there?
No, you covered it. Thank you, Wharton.
Okay.
And I love your example just because it is it's different than the standard BPAC where it's connected directly with the city, and I have heard from some advocates that something maybe their village or city staff say is like they don't have they can't devote staff time to a BPAC. So I think your version of this Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee could work if that is the situation.
Yeah, we're also, I should point out, we're also really lucky in Des Plaines to have a very bright and motivated group of people in the city engineering department. They're the ones who got together originally with Active Trans to do the active transportation plan in 2012, which ultimately led to this whole thing getting off the ground. And they have a complete streets policy that was part of that same period and got passed in that same period. So, in many ways, we serve as like a chorus of support for them because they're just doing such a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And so we're really fortunate. I think we just got lucky with some of the people involved at the city level who just do a fantastic job. So
yeah, that's another good point. Like you found the champions in Des Plaines who really care about this, and those champions need community support in order to,
yeah, that's
push
right.
these ideas forward. So
yeah, it really helps them. They're very happy. We communicate a lot with them. So
yeah, it's great. It's great that you have a good relationship.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you, Oren. So next up, we're going to have Jürgen speak. So let me just introduce you all to Jürgen. So he lives in the Village of Arlington Heights. He's actually originally from Germany, and he, biked all his life for the first 20 years of his life. That was his only mode of transportation. He came to the United States in 1999, and he says that's here he learned how to ride a bike wearing a helmet. And he started bike commuting in 2002. I believe he was living in Chicago, and then he ended up moving out to the burbs. He got married. He actually met his wife through a bike ride. It was the ultimate neighborhood ride in Arlington Heights, and now they have they have twin girls, 2 daughters. And so in addition, Jürgen he's a league cycling instructor. And so you can, if you know anyone who wants to learn to ride a bike, check in with Jürgen or any league cycling instructor in the area. And let's see, what else? What else am I missing? He started attending the BPAC meetings in Arlington Heights in 2014, and then he decided to apply to become part of the group. And now he is currently the chair of their BPAC. And then in addition to biking, he works in Schaumburg in finance and accounting. So I will turn it over to you now, Jürgen.
Thank you, Maggie. I really appreciate the introduction. I hope everybody can hear me okay because we didn't do a sound check. I don't want to replicate everything that has previously been said because there's a lot of similarities between how we are set up in Arlington Heights compared to how Tom is set up in Elgin. We are an official village commission. That means we are appointed village officials, same as in Elgin, 7 people. Proposed by the mayor, appointed in concurrence with the village board of trustees. We meet technically every month except for December, but really it's on the basis of the call of the chair. So we average about 8 meetings per year, which can be, the record short is 45 minutes, record length is pushing 2.5. You actually need a quorum vote if you want to go past 9:30 p.m. in Arlington Heights. So that's where we stand from an organizational perspective. We have one liaison with the village in the engineering department as a staff liaison. We have some contact with other village boards and also with the Board of Trustees. I will elaborate on that a little bit as we talk about our successes. So very similar to the setup then in Elgin. The commission has been in place since the late 1980s, originally as the Bicycle Advisory Commission, now as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. I think the name change was around about in 2010. that's pretty much the setup. As far as successes that we've had, of course, the passing of the bike plan and compiling the bike plan and working with somebody other than Active Trans on the bike plan was one of our major successes. We also had in the same year the bicycle parking ordinance, which was, as I think Wharton was saying, how, if you've never been involved with village government, you wonder how it all works. We got a tremendous amount of flack from another commission, the Almighty Plan Commission, which actually is a much more powerful commission than, say, the Bicycle Advisory, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. But we eventually got it passed unanimously by the Board of Trustees of the village, so that was a great success. Probably what we are best known for is the community bike ride, which my predecessor actually Peter Sabo actually put in place in, I believe, 2013. You can probably not underestimate that achievement. For years, I think village officials had said, or village staff had said, that it's basically impossible for the village to organize such a bike ride for liability reasons. Peter overcame that, and it has become a twice annual event, the organization of which has become extremely easy and efficient. Everybody knows what to do, the village knows what to do, and we try to have it twice a year with anywhere between 20, when the weather is really bad, and 200 participants. Smaller things that count a lot, but are difficulties in other communities. Bike signage. It is relatively easy as a commission to make a specific proposal for bike signage and say, like, hey, we need to improve the bike signage here. We need this and this sign at this and this location. You give them a PowerPoint that has a mocked-up photo of what you want and what it needs to say, and you pretty much get it. And if you wander around town, you sometimes also say that they pick up on the idea, and all of a sudden their bike signs replace that you didn't even ask for. So that has really gained. We have really gained some momentum there. We are continuously updating a bike map that is published as an official document of the Village of Arlington Heights. So that has also been a regular occurrence and something we are known for, and also something you can find on our webpage on the website of the Village of Arlington Heights. Last year we initiated bike counts just to see where we are, to have a baseline on these are like pen and pencil and paper counts, so a very basic form of counting, but just to have a baseline as to how active transportation is developing in the village. Now, unlike what I heard from Tom, we have quite high turnover in our commission, but it's typically not very challenging to find new commission members. Challenges. Probably the biggest challenge is the narrow scope of the commission. The commission is actually regulated by village ordinance, and the village ordinance actually only names two goals that the commission has: A, to establish a plan for a bikeway network, and B, to establish comprehensive bicycle education. Everything else, such as organizing the community bike ride, is actually outside the scope officially of what the village ordinance actually suggests the commission should do. But I think a good way to think about it is just to go ahead, try it, and do it like Peter Sabo did, and you give a gift to the village that is outstanding. Other challenges, I guess, for me, not having worked in private corporations all my life. I'd never heard about the Illinois Open Meetings Act. The Illinois Open Meetings Act, I call it OMA, is a big inhibitor of actually working effectively between the commissions. So basically, the Illinois Open Meeting Act says if there is at least a majority of a quorum of commission members present, they are basically, and they're discussing active transportation. They are in an official village capacity, and they must publish an agenda, make it a public meeting, and they cannot just talk amongst themselves and throw around some ideas. So, but what does it mean, majority of a quorum? That means a quorum, we have 7 members, a quorum is 4, a majority of a quorum is 3, meaning we can discuss amongst each other one-on-one, because that's one less than the majority of the quorum. We can email one-on-one. You cannot group email. You can not do other things. That is a big inhibitor for actually tossing around ideas. Now, we are a commission that meets publicly. That means we can have guests, and sometimes we do, but I think in the last 3.5 years that I've been attending, probably 6 or 7 people have shown up. So the public interest in our meetings is not tremendously high, and we wish it would be higher. Our budget is limited, $3,500 per year. That's more than other people have, and it does not include the signage that comes out of another line item of the engineering budget. But of course, that's not a whole lot to work with. I think other panel members have already said it. Finding time is difficult. Making a bike signage plan, for example, according to the Northwest Municipal Conference guidelines, and determining exactly what signage a route needs to have can be a very, very detail-oriented, time-consuming matter. And you need to find people who do that. Organizing a community bike ride is a lot of detailed work and a lot of busy work, and you just have to do this. And you need to find people who are willing to commit that time. So that's definitely something that you need to keep in mind. And also staff time is always a limiting factor. We are happy to have a very consistent support from staff. So that's very good, but of course there's also limitations, especially since they are from the engineering department during construction season, so it's much easier to get access after October and before April, rather than trying to get support during busy construction season. I want to echo what Morton says regarding what lessons learned do you have. Definitely, you can make a difference when you are on the BPAC. That depends on how busy you are and how much you want to make out of it and how hard you push for it. However, you have to think about how can I best advance my agenda? Can I advance my agenda being as part of the village administration and government, or can I best advance my agenda as an outside advocate? I do not have a final answer on that. I sat in the Ride Illinois Bike Summit and said, I don't think I could do most of this advocacy work that they're discussing because I'm part of the village administration. I cannot push from outside for changes. So that's probably the biggest question that I have not answered for myself, but that other people should keep in mind when they think about how they can best advocate for active transportation in their community.
All right. Well, thank you for the information and the lessons learned are very useful to hear about. And it also sounds like you are doing a lot in Arlington Heights, so it's definitely interesting to hear. So I'm going to unmute Morton and Tom. And oh my gosh, Tom. I might have accidentally removed you.
I'm still here. I
Oh,
see
you're
Tom
still here.
on the list. No, that's Wharton.
Oh no, that's
This
Wharton.
is Wharton.
Oh,
yeah,
no,
but I see Tom.
Yeah.
Can you say something, Tom?
No. Well. Well, I'll send him a text message and tell him I think I removed him from the meeting. But for Wharton and Jurgen here, does anyone here that's still in the webinar, do you have any questions for them? There's a comment box in the left-hand corner if you're on the webinar. So feel free to type something in there. If you're on your phone, I can unmute you. I could actually unmute everyone, but let's see if anyone types in the comment box first. Just checking in with Tom. I guess I have a question while we're waiting for anyone else's questions. I have a question about balancing bicycle priorities with pedestrian priorities. Do you feel like both modes get equal attention in your BPACs, or because I have heard like there is a recommendation to split up, potentially having a bicycle advisory committee and a pedestrian advisory committee, having them be separate if that's even possible in the community. But just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, if I can speak from the Village of Arlington Heights, clearly our commission is the BPAC, BP standing for pedestrian. However, there is, I think if we're honest with ourselves, a much clearer focus on bicycling than there's on walking in Arlington Heights. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that has changed, one appointee to our board recently was a planner for paced transportation. And of course, she brings in a totally different perspective, which can be very, very enriching. I definitely think there is enough room for both cycling, for actually all three, cycling, walking, and active transportation or transit in a commission like a BPAC.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, I don't see really that much of a conflict. Your balance between the two comes a lot from how many requests for improvements you get from either side, and there's a lot of overlap. I mean, our S-curve project is going to be pretty equally, I would say, balanced between benefits for bikes and pedestrians, as an example. So I think it's fine to have both together.
And Tom is back.
Yep.
Sorry I accidentally removed you from the webinar. We're just talking about whether pedestrian and bicycle, the two modes, get equal attention in your council or committee, and how it works. Yeah.
I think I think we tend to focus more on bicycle as a mode of transportation, although, we have, for example, our sidewalk gap study was, something that was definitely, we had the pedestrians in mind, when we decided to take on that project. And I think, when you're, especially looking at intersections and the safety of pedestrians getting across intersections, I think you're really addressing those intersections for both modes of transportation. So I think, we work on both. We want to make Elgin safe and comfortable for both pedestrians and bicyclists to move about.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have a few questions from some people. So Bill says, our BPAC in Wheaton has a membership that has a mean age of over 50. I believe that a skewing to a younger age would be better. What do others have for an age distribution, and do you think younger is better?
I would say it's good to get the perspective from younger people, but I'm 63 years old. I feel like I'm 40. So, I think if you're active, you can understand the needs of really your work. You want to make the community safe and comfortable for people of all ages to move about. So, I think that's our focus here in Elgin, and I'm pretty certain it probably is in Des Plaines and Arlington Heights as well.
Yeah, we certainly have an age distribution that is lower than 50 plus, although I am over 50, I will say that. However, my predecessor, Peter Savo, I believe he has not hit 30 yet, and the man made a big impact. So I think just a good age distribution is good. However, I think much more important is a difference of opinion and perspective. So just having a pace planner on board, although she's clearly below 50, is much more important than making sure all age groups are represented. Before that, we had a member of the Northwest Municipal Council Conference, I think also a planner. That was had a very interesting perspective. So the diversity of perspective, I think, is more important than the diversity of age in the BPAC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Terry Witt from Bartlett just wrote me an email and agrees that encouraging more diversity in our advocacy is important in the burbs.
Yeah, I don't have any major additions to what's already been said, so I think we're pretty well distributed age-wise, and I agree with Jürgen. The differences in perspective are probably have more impact. Right. Young people tend to be busy. That's another, But why don't we go to the next?
All right. Next question is from Charlie. He says, how have you been able to get bicycling viewed as transportation as opposed to merely recreation?
I mean, talking about routes to schools, talking about routes to downtown, that kind of emphasizes the transport aspect of bicycling. So if you're advocating for some particular type of, different types of improvements skew differently. Obviously, improvements on the river trail would be more recreation oriented. I think our advocacy has probably been predominantly transportation based. And I think there is a barrier, especially in a very highly car oriented community, towards getting bicycling viewed as an alternative form of transportation rather than something you do on the weekend, for fun. But yeah, it's partly built around, I think, some of what kind of projects you choose. So maybe, I don't know, that's part of an answer.
I totally agree with Charlie that there is certainly, that's one of the challenges, right? I mean, most people still see it as recreation, and convincing other boards that are involved in processes that involve the BPAC that actually we're talking about transportation here can be a challenge. I mean, most visibly seen when we discuss the bicycle parking ordinance, because the bicycle parking ordinance, we did not talk about potent bicycle parking on Lake Arlington, which is pretty much the only recreational cycling within village boundaries that we have. But we discussed about putting it for businesses, schools, and other organizations, and clearly the discussions with the other commissions showed that it's difficult to break up the perspective that this is a hobby from a small group of privileged people to ride, and instead try to build a perspective that it's actually something that everybody can do over a certain age, and that you can actually do to get to move about town. But I think in our discussions we have been able to break that mold a little bit, but it's an ongoing struggle. That's for sure.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Maggie. Let's move on, I think.
Let's see. I think that might be it for questions, and it is a little past 1, so I don't want to keep you all. But here, I'm just going to go to one more slide here. Yeah. Here's our contact info for Wharton, Jürgen, Tom. So if any of you want to get in touch with them with questions about their BPACs, sounds like they're happy to share, and of course feel free to get in touch with me. Our next webinar is going to be on June 21st, which is Thursday, and it's going to be about event organizing. We've got someone from Elk Grove Village, Dave Simmons, and from Chicago Heights, Jessica Mancina, and they're going to be speaking about a bike rodeo organizing event and bike pit stops, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some walking and biking events we've organized in Chicago to give you some ideas for things you might do this summer. So yeah, and we'll get this webinar on YouTube, so feel free to share with others that you think might be interested in creating a BPAC in their community. So thank you guys. This is really great. Really interesting to hear about everything you're doing and lessons learned too, because yeah, you guys have had a lot of experience doing this. So appreciate you taking the time to share all of this with us.
Thank you, Maggie, very much for organizing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.